Hey everyone, it's John Heath here again for Milton Rose Learning with another Let's Learn video on the poem Exposure by Wilfred Owen. So back into the trenches today. So we're going to look at some of the key context, the history that you really need to know when you're diving into this poem. Then we'll do a bit of a poetry reading, so we'll just get a feel for the phonology and the sound of the kind of poem as it's read out. And then we'll look at some of the key anchor annotations which should go into your poetry anthologies ready for exams and class assessments. Okay, so let's dive in. So we've got the big man there, Wilfred Owen, Loving Life, and then we've got, as we can see, a really interesting image there of trench warfare, or just leaving the trenches. So we're very much in very much in World War I territory here. So first piece of context you need to understand with anything Wilfred Owen, World War I trench warfare. So Owen was drawing on his own experiences as a soldier in World War I, and he was a captain, which is one of the toughest positions because you're right in the middle, a middle rank in the trenches. And it shows how the harsh weather was as deadly and relentless as the enemy, hence the title Exposure, which is the medical term for when you kind of freeze. So a lot of the people tend to forget this, but in the trenches and whatnot, soldiers did freeze to death. They would be left out on sentry duty and you'd wake up in the morning and they've just frozen solid at their posts. That did happen. So Owen was kind of incensed with that because it showed a real callousness for the soldiers' lives. Then we have the anti-war message, or what we call pacifism, which is anti-war. Owen is challenging the romanticised view of war in this poem, and he's exposing its futility, the human suffering, and the emotional numbness of the soldiers. They went through hell in the trenches, and it's one of Wilfred Owen's authorial intentions to tease that out, because back home a lot of the public didn't know how bad it was, so he's trying to pierce the veil there and actually show the public how awful it was. Then we have, truth through poetry, as part of a generation of war poets such as Siegfried Sassoon and Edmund Blunden, and there's a whole bunch of others. Owen aimed to tell the truth about war's horrors, again, as I was saying, countering that patriotic propaganda narrative with very raw realism. He's trying to really unpick the horrors of this conflict. Okay, right, so interesting photos there as well, or kind of images I should say, of trench warfare. Now let's do a little bit of a poetry reading here. Okay, I'll try and do my best. It's a big poem, so I'll need to kind of do a few stanzas at a time. So this is Soldiers in the Trenches, and this is the poem Exposure by Wilfred Owen. Our brains ache in the merciless iced east winds that knife us. Wearied we keep awake because the night is silent. Low drooping flares confuse our memory of the salient. Worried by silence, sentries whisper, curious, nervous, but nothing happens. They're kind of waiting. Part of the worst part of trench warfare was the waiting for the enemy. Stanza 2. Watching, we hear the mad gusts tugging on the wire, like twitching agonies of men among its brambles. Northward, incessantly, the flickering gunnery rumbles, the guns, basically artillery. Far off, like a dull rumour of some other war. What are we doing here? The poignant misery of dawn begins to grow. We only know war lasts. Rain soaks and clouds sag stormy. Dawn massing in the east, her melancholy army attacks once more in ranks on shivering ranks of grey. But nothing happens. They're still waiting, aren't they? But in agony, really. Okay. There we go. Next stanza. Sudden successive flights of bullets streak the silence, so some bullets kind of fly past them, less deadly than the air that shudders black with snow, with sidelong flowing flakes that flock, pause and renew. We watch them, wandering up and down the wind's nonchalance, but nothing happens. Pale flakes with fingering stealth come feeling for our faces. We cringe in holes, back on forgotten dreams, and stare, snow-dazed, deep into grassier ditches. So we drowse, sun-dozed, littered with blossoms trickling where the blackbird fusses. Is it that we are dying? So the weather and the cold and the misery is just kind of, it's slowly killing them off, okay? And it's killing them off, really importantly, it's killing them off quicker than the enemy, okay? The weather is the true opponent here. Next stanza. Slowly our ghosts drag home, glimpsing the sunk fires, glozed with crusted dark red jewels. Crickets jingle there. For hours the innocent mice rejoice. The house is theirs, shutters and doors all closed. On us the doors are closed. We turn back to our dying. Since we believe not otherwise can kind fires burn, nor ever sun smile true on child or field or fruit. For God's invincible spring our love is made afraid. Therefore not loath we lie out here. Therefore we're born, for love of God seems dying. Tonight this frost will fasten on this mud and us, so they'll freeze to death almost, shrivelling many hands and puckering foreheads crisp. The burying party picks and shovels in shaking grasp, pause over half-known faces. All their eyes are ice, but nothing happens. Okay, it kind of ends on a very pathetic note, where you assume something big's going to happen and it just doesn't, because in the trenches a lot of it was sheer boredom. You'd wait for months sometimes for an attack. And as we can see, the true enemy is the snow and the wind and the rain that kind of just clings to your kind of soul almost. Okay, now with that in mind, let's think about some anchoring annotations for your anthology. Okay, so first off then, I think you've got to get in there the refrain. A refrain is a repeated word or phrase or image in a poem, and there's a refrain of despair here. But nothing happens, that's one of the refrains. So it's repetition, it creates a sense of futility, boredom and endless waiting. War is not just action but psychological torture. As I say, part of the worst parts of the psychology of trench warfare was just waiting. You could wait there for weeks, for months sometimes, waiting for either the enemy to attack you or the order for you to attack them. The worst part was the waiting, and that refrain kind of brings that home to the reader. Also the cyclical structure, it kind of starts, you have but nothing happens, and then it's at the end as well. So it reinforces the stagnant, hopeless mood of the soldier's experience. It's always the same. You get up, you hear bombs going off or artillery, you have your food, it's just the same kind of thing until you either die or, survive the war. It just goes on and on and on, and it's reflected in the structure. Then I would say the power of nature, and that's a great image there, a great kind of picture for us to visualize it. The merciless east winds that knife us, like almost stab them. So personification, because obviously the wind can't knife you, but it just feels like that. It's described as an attacker, more deadly than the enemy soldiers. That's a key point to take from this poem. The enemy, the Germans, weren't as bad as the wind and the rain and the snow. That was the true enemy. The violent imagery as well, knife us, that suggests physical pain, and as I say, nature becomes the true enemy here. Okay. Then we have religious trauma, what we would call religious trauma here. Trauma meaning pain that you're going through, either mental or physical. For love of God seems to be dying. So there's a loss of faith here in the trenches. War has shaken religious belief. How can God make something as awful as World War One? God feels distant or indifferent, like he doesn't care about the suffering of the soldiers. But it has a double meaning as well, because it could refer to the soldiers dying and losing hope, or it could refer to God's love disappearing entirely. You can take it whichever way you want, but it's very, very ambiguous there. I would tease out both meanings in an essay. And then the last one, we'll go for bleak natural imagery. So dawn massing in the east her melancholy army. So the personification of dawn again, because dawn can't mass anything, it can't make an army. Dawn is also usually a hopeful image, but here it's been what we call subverted. It's been turned inside out to bring even more suffering. Okay, so there's a subversion of the symbolism of dawn. It's also an ironic metaphor. Nature forms an army against the soldiers, so even time and weather have become the enemies. You got the Germans to fight, but you've also got the army of the snow and the rain and the weather. So you're fighting two battles at the same time. Absolutely awful. Okay, so hopefully, I know it's been a bit of a misery trip, but hopefully you've enjoyed that kind of introduction to the poem exposure, and that should give you a really good jumping off point now to dive into it with your teacher. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon as always to never miss another Let's Learn video again. We really appreciate the support. If you have any comments about the video or anything you want to talk about with World War I or Wilfred Owen, please do just pop them in the comments and we'll always do our best to reply. Okay then, so it just remains to say with exposure, get diving in and yeah, enjoy kind of studying that poem. So we'll speak to you soon and take care.